In this Ventra Pro video, we will be going through the different settings you have for sounding alarms and getting notifications. So from your control settings page, you can arrow until you get to sound alarm when. Now here you can scroll up and down and you will come to all the different areas that you can set for the Ventra to sound an alarm. The first one you have is the fixed high temp exceeds. Now in this case it's set at 100 degrees and this is a fixed setting, so it will stay at whatever temperature you set it at your entire grow. It does not change with a set temp ramp. So in this case the 100 will stay there until I change it to something else. Arrow down and you have your next setting, your temperature above and below. Now this will ramp with your set point age ramp. So if your set point is at 65, and in this case it's 85, it will stay at that 20 degree setting throughout the entire grow unless you change it. But it will ramp with your temperature. And again, you have the above and your below to sound the alarm for your different temperature settings. Arrow down again. You now have an option, if you have an outdoor temperature sensor wired in, you have an option for the outside temp influence high alarm. And here you can press enter and you can tell it yes or tell it no. If you tell it yes, then as your temperature, outside temperature rises, in this case above 85 degrees, your alarm will follow that high outside temp. So if it gets to 90, then your new temperature sound above will be 90 degrees. If it's 92, it will be 92. And it only does that for above your temperature sound alarm. And that's if you're using an outside temp sensor. But if you don't want to use that, then you just tell it no and it won't look at that outside temperature influence. Arrow down again, your next option is feed sensor number 1 on time exceeds. And this you said hours, minutes, seconds. And if you have a feed sensor wired in, then you have the option of having an on time exceeds amount. And in this case, I have it set for 2 hours. So if my feed sensor is active and a feeder group is running and is detected for more than 2 hours, the Ventra will alarm. Now the one thing about this on time exceeds, if you get an alarm for that, and it will shut that feeder down and it will not let it come back on until the alarm is acknowledged and noticed and cleared. So you want to make sure that on your on time exceeds, if you ever get an on time alarm, make sure you clear that alarm before, so that your feeder will then become active again. Arrow down again. Now our other option is the feed sensor off time exceeds. In this case we have it set for 4 hours. Again, hours, minutes, seconds. And so if your feed current sensor does not detect any activity on that feed line for, in this case, 4 hours, you will get an alarm. You'll get a notification to let you know that your feeder has been off for more than 4 hours. Arrow down again, and we come to our water meter setting for gallon per hour flow exceeds. This you can set whichever you would like depending on the age of your animals, how much water they're using in a hourly time. In this case I have it set for 150 gallons per hour. If I get more than that flow, then I would get an alarm. Now if you have more than one water meter, to check that setting you use the plus or minus key. In this case now we went to water meter number 2 and it's at 150 also. So again, now I'm back to number 1. So if you have multiple water meters, you just simply use the plus and minus keys to scroll to the different water meters to set your gallon per hour flow exceeds alarm. Arrow down, and now we have a water meter 24-hour drop, and this is a percentage. In this case I have an example set of 10%. So if my water consumption drops 10% or more in a 24-hour period, I will get an alarm and it will let me know. Same way, water number 2, hit the plus button, it's also set for 10%. arrow down, and now you have your static pressure stays above. So if you're using static pressure, you have a static pressure sensor hooked up, you have the option of having some alarms to notify you if there's something going on. In this case, I have it set for static pressure of a 0.17, and I have it set for 1 minute. So if my static pressure stays above a 0.17 for a minute, I will get an alarm and it will let me know that there's something not right. And if you do get a high pressure alarm, you have the option of having it open all your inlets. You can choose yes, or you can choose no. And this is just a potential safety factor. If you do get a high alarm and there is a high static pressure problem, if you tell it to open all your inlets, then once that alarm is generated, it will automatically open all the inlets in the barn to try to alleviate that pressure and not have any damage caused to ceilings or anything. Arrow down, static pressure stays below. This would be a low static pressure alarm. So in this case, I have it set for a 0.03 for 30 seconds. So if a fan is running and it's looking for static pressure, it knows there should be static pressure. And if it does not generate more than a 0.03 for 30 seconds, an alarm will sound and it'll let me know that there's a problem. Arrow down again, and here it says fan on, static pressure below. Now this function will be if you're using proportional settings for your fans in association with an inlet or a curtain. If the controller is calling for a fan that should be running and in the on state, again, if the static pressure is a 0.03 or less and it stays that way for 30 seconds, then it'll send me it'll alarm the condition and let you know that there's a problem. Next alarm possibility is the humidity sensor. If you have a humidity sensor hooked up, you have the option that if it gets a bad reading, that it can send you an alarm. You know, you can send that for yes, or you can not worry about that if you're not overly concerned about the humidity sensor sending you an alarm. So if it detects a no reading or a bad reading, then it can send you an alarm if you prefer. Arrow down again, we now have highest, lowest air probes differ by. Now here is a nice little feature to sound a notification or an alarm. If you have multiple temp sensors in your barn, if any of those temp sensors differ, in this case by more than 15 degrees, it will give you an alarm and let you know that there's something not right. And you can set that, the default will be 99, but you can, put that down at whatever you feel is necessary. 10, 15 degrees is a pretty good rule of thumb, because, I'd want to know if I had temp sensors in the barn that are reading that much different from each other. Could possibly be that you just have a temperature reading that's temperature sensor that's going bad, or maybe, a curtain fell or some vents broke, strings broke, and so they're laying wide open. But that's what that means. The high-low air probe differs by. And that is the alarms that the Ventra you can set for.